So we've loads to talk about. We have Keith Wood on the line and Liam Toland as well, both of whom had to hang around for 3-4 hours extra at Thomond Park. You've warmed up, Keith?
I have. Nice and toasty now, no bother whatsoever. It was fine.
Liam Toland, who selfishly turned the car around and went back to his house. You were just fine, Liam.
I was, but I did leave a little note at the foot of the stairs to say you can come join me. They didn't in the end.
We had the Six Nations launch. We'll talk to you about the Champions Cup game, the Munster game in particular, which you were at, and how the quarterfinals are shaping up. But the Six Nations launch was on today in London. I presume, Keith, you were dragged to a few of these in your day, or was it all as PR driven and well organised as this?
I would say I may have been at about 14 of them, I think, from when I played, and then for the kind of years afterwards with I was an ambassador for RBS and with the BBC, and it was often on my birthday. I actually got some birthday cakes that were offered to me at times, which I'm gluten free now, so I don't have that anymore. But yeah, it's an absolute mart of journalists, different groups from the media, and now with all the different digital and social media groups, there's another load of them. And it is literally you're herded from one place to the next, to the next, to the next. All the different countries and their media have they want a different interpretation from what it is that you want to say as a captain or as a next player, whatever it is. It is carnage. I mean, they managed to get through a huge amount, all the photographs, everything that has to happen to it, but no, I don't think anybody likes it. I think it's one of those necessary evils that you have to do as being part of the promotion of the game. It is long enough away so that you can recover from it, but for someone like Rory Best, who has had to fly back, or I don't know, did they fly down to Spain and they've had to fly all the way up and back? That's a bit of an old pain.
It's a bit of a pain. I think at one point Eddie Jones just said, sod this. I just think he threw in the towel and said, I'm just going to talk absolute nonsense whenever the opportunity arises. So he's asked about the injury situation. Chris Robshaw comes up at one point. He says, Chris Robshaw's unbelievable in the pool at the moment. He did a water aerobics class with a bunch of Portuguese women yesterday. Apparently he was the best in the class. If we play Italy in the pool, he's going to be alright. If we play Italy in rugby, he'll be borderline. So Eddie Jones was just throwing out this kind of stuff for much of the afternoon. On the favourites tagger, who's favourites? He felt England were maybe being written out of things. And he said, well, why did you get that impression? He said, I can read. In Australia, they do teach us how to read. Popular conception is that Australians can't read, but we do have an education system. We borrowed it from England, so it's quite a rigid system. But I've read a number of the comments in the Six Nations. It says, Ireland's provincial sides are doing well. Scotland had a great autumn series. We had a muddling autumn series, a list of injuries, long as my arm. We've one team sneaked in the Champions Cup quarterfinals. It's all doom and gloom. That's what I'm reading. And one journalist says, where are you reading this? You're the favourites. And he said, I must be making it up then, mate. I've a great imagination. And off he went to do his next interview.
Yeah, I see that happening a lot. I remember at one stage giving 6 different answers to the same question and trying to justify it with it, which was it was wrong, but at that stage I was so sick of it. And I was retired, so this was not as a player, as an ambassador. Nobody really cared that I tipped Italy to win, and for some people, and everybody else at different people. It was just, it's just part of it.
Yeah.
You know, there is sport is a bit of a circus, and it has become far more complicated, and everything you say seems to take on a huge level of importance, and we know that everything is shadow boxing before the big event.
Yeah, well, Joe Schmidt was asked about Eddie Jones labelling Ireland as very much the favourites at another interview, even though it contradicts his earlier point. And Schmidt says it must be on the back of Eddie having 12 teams to select from and the 8 days he's had in camp with his players as opposed to us having 3. He said, I know Eddie from old and I know he's going to throw in the odd grenade, and fair play to him for doing it. Keeps us on our toes. So that was kind of the mood. It seemed jovial enough. The one Joe Schmidt quote, Liam, which has caught the headlines certainly from this morning, is about Simon Zebo and his logic for leaving Zebo out of the squad. So the quote from Schmidt was, Simon is great value to have in the squad, irresistible charm about him, always smiling, positivity great, but by his own standards he didn't have a great day in Paris a few weeks ago. It's crucial at the time of selection that we know guys are in good form, though he did say on the potential of getting in at some stage across the Six Nations. There is a bit of time in the Six Nations with Pro 14 games that he can still strike a game. So Simon Zebo, according to Joe Schmidt, is not in good enough form to be in the Irish squad, Liam?
Well, I suppose, Joe, that if you don't want to do something, one reason is as good as any other, or one excuse is as good as any other. I think it's quite a damning thing that Joe Schmidt has said. It's quite a put down and almost patronising to say he's always jovial and smiling and he's happy and he's good value to the camp. I just sense there isn't a great love between the two of them. I don't know why. Now, with that in mind, Joe, I could sit down with you tomorrow and we could pour over videos and I can point out a lot of the irritations in Simon Zebo's game around maybe the attention to detail of some aspects, how he carries into contact, and sometimes he can put himself in a poor rucking position, etc., etc., etc. But the overwhelming picture he gives me every time I watch him is this guy can transition a ball from really crap position into something really exciting. He can turn a game. And I think of when Ireland played Australia in the November series, two series ago, he came on with Rob Kearney, who had gone off injured, and he just turned the fixture. He has that ability to turn the fixture. So I know the Six Nations, and Keith, I'm sure, will back me, is a unique environment that is not like this, like the November series, and it's not like the Pro 14 and all the other different competitions. The Six Nations, the minor errors that can turn a fixture happens in the Six Nations like no other competition. That all said, I don't know, is there a rugby player in Ireland who has the ability to turn, maybe Larmour in time, but today Zebo can do it. And I just think there just isn't a love between the two of them, and I've nothing to base that on. I'm not observing them in contact or in shape or form, but I think it's really, really disappointing that he's not involved for the things that Joe Smith's mentioned, those jovial things, but way beyond that, the way he can actually command a fixture, and the way, and oftentimes, like myself and Keith were watching him at Thomond Park, we were there live, obviously.
Yeah. Did he look to you to be out of form?
No, he was class on Sunday.
Okay, so yeah, so everybody knows that. So it is a strange thing for Joe Schmidt to come out and to say this when nobody will buy it. So actually, if you're Schmidt, you're saying something that nobody knows is true. That's a strange thing to come out and do. Well, like a very simple explanation is, well, look, we all know Simon's going to Paris. I'm sorry to see him go. Jordan Larmour's here. We've got a World Cup I'm building towards. So I made the decision I'm working with Larmour permanently, in so much as I can see, and that's the logic for the decision. And I wish Simon well. So they were his two options, and he went for Simon seems to be a happy kind of fella, and that's nice, and but he's not in form. Strange. Yeah, like it seems almost a patronising put down, which didn't need to happen. I just don't understand. I just think it's based on love. There's a lack of love there between the two of them. But what I watched sitting beside Keith, obviously, on Sunday, was a guy. But not only when you're at the match, you can actually you have the luxury of not just looking at him but looking at his back three. And when you look at the players around him, when he gets the ball, I think Keith Earls should do a PhD on his ability to bounce back. Right, I think he's just a phenomenal mental fortitude that has him back to the level he's playing again. But when you see Zebo getting the ball, you see Keith Earls lighting up because he knows there's opportunity and he goes hunting with Zebo. There are certain players, I think Ethan Asiwa is one of those guys in Leinster who can actually send shivers around the team that are on the pitch that create opportunity, and it's just a shame to lose it. I don't understand why he needs to make this decision, and you could factor in Tadhg Beirne as well and all that sort of stuff, but in this particular instance I just don't get it. Keith, I'll get your take on the Joe Schmidt comments today, not to put two and two together and potentially get 5. But I did note, I think a lot of people did earlier this month, Zebo did that interview ahead of his move to Racine Metro, and comments appeared in L'Équipe. And there's always the danger with translation, but maybe not so here, where one of the quotes which would have appeared on Irish websites was, "With Munster, I'm free to try things, to play the moves that I see. I don't have any shackles. Joe's a super coach who has had great success with Ireland, but we talked already about it face to face, and I said to him that I couldn't play in such a rigid structure. I can't play like that." I dare say saying something like that publicly is not something Joe Schmidt forgets. I could be way off the mark, but it jumped to mind, I must say, when I saw the Schmidt comments today. I remember the Zebo comments a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I dare say it's not a thing to say to your coach that I can't play to a structure either. Would say to his face isn't right. If you say, "But you can't play to your structure, to my structure," you don't get picked, probably. So look, I would share a lot of Liam's sentiments on it. And I don't know that it's a form thing. I don't think it can be. And so they always say form is temporary, class is permanent. I would find elements of Simon Zebo to be incredibly frustrating. And it took me quite a while to warm to him, because he is a bit flash and I may be a little bit conservative. And but I think over the last number of years, his strike rate is phenomenal. His ability to entertain and bring a crowd with him and lift his team is pretty fantastic, and he's different. And I just think you need a bit of different every now and then. So the reason I don't think form comes into it was that as soon as he announced that he wasn't that he was going to go to France, then he didn't appear in an Ireland squad. So I don't think there's any coincidence in that, and that just makes that a bit more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Tadhg Beirne is different, and actually it was funny because when Joe Schmidt was asked in relation to Tadhg Beirne why he wasn't in it, his rationale is perfect.
Yeah, I have those quotes here. I can mention them. Okay. One last thing. I know you're going to say stop labouring the bloody Zebo comments. As a player, would you have thought a bit strange that he's brought up Zebo's form? Bit cold? Teammate of yours, potentially?
It's a bit cold. Of course it is. But it's also the right of the coach to decide to do whatever he wants to do, and there's been lots of cold comments that we've heard from coaches about players over all the years. That's par for the course. And what's more is, and people kind of forget this every now and then, yes, you're part of a team, and we often use the line, the king is dead, long live the king. It's the next king. It's the next game. It's the next team, the next group of guys that are in together. When you're not in a position to be able to influence those decisions, and you're not in a position to change anything at all, then you get on and do your job. And all those guys are saying, bit of a rough ride on Zebo, but come on, France are up in 10 days.
Yeah. On the Tadhg Beirne logic, for people who didn't catch it today, what he said about Beirne was, we had a really good conversation. Problem with Tadhg is if we take him to Spain, we're required to make him back available for the Scarlets. He's played 1,350 minutes already this season. Our players don't really play so much. He said, because he's so resilient and because he plays so well, I thought he was huge in the last 2 games. He's going to come in and visit us, and we'll get to catch up again. When we have those camp weeks, those gap weeks in the Six Nations, he means, when we have those camp weeks, he's got to go back and be available for Scarlets. That intermittent involvement with the squad, when it's your first involvement, that's one of the things that tip the balance away from him. And I thought James Ryan was really good against Montpellier, and Ian Henderson is playing big. You said perfect logic there, Keith. Can't fault that too much?
No, I don't think you can. He's been out of the Ireland system for a while, and in times past, you could definitely pop a guy in and say, look, you're going to have to be there. You may have to go back to Wales, but you come back in again. It's not that complicated. Joe Schmidt's Ireland is incredibly focused, incredibly organised, and you need to know and learn the systems. Otherwise, you can't really play in it. You're trying to make it up as you're going along, which doesn't really work. So if you have a guy who you want to bring into the squad, but he has to go away every few days, that's not exactly right either. So look, it adds to the story of why Ireland tend to only pick players at home, and we know there has been an exception with Johnny Sexton. I think we can all accept that exception too. But if you just take that aside for a present moment in time, you would say that he is the form second row in the Champions Cup. He has played some phenomenal rugby. And I could see if we had an injury or two that you might take the risk on it, even in that sort of situation, because he's coming over here anyway. But I don't think we need to get caught up in that one and say, oh, it's a disgrace that he isn't. No, there is method to that madness.
Yeah.
You can understand why that would be the case.
Yeah, funny. John Barclay was there today on Scottish duty, his Scarlets teammate, and he was saying that already Tadhg Beirne has the Scarlets Player of the Year sewn up. It's already been decided. He's been that good. The only other comment really that caught my eye from Schmidt, Liam, was about the French. Obviously, 3rd of February, first game up is the French in the Stade de France. The French have 6 uncapped players in their squad. If you do a look of the number of caps in the French squad, it's unbelievably inexperienced, and there are so many players with under 10 caps. Not least at out half, where they have Jalibert, who was born in 1998, just to make everybody a bit sick.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Jalibert, born in 1998, who is playing at Bordeaux, which is where Jacques Brunel, the coach, has come from most recently, so we would have seen him. And then they have Bello, who we saw for Toulon against the Scarlets on the Saturday, 21, missed a few kicks. So it seems they're going to be relying on one of those two guys at out half, and there's a lot of inexperience. I mean, Joe Schmidt was saying he expects them to be very good, as he would say, Liam. He won't know what to expect, frankly. There won't be too much footage of this particular concoction of coach and new players to analyse.
I was just giggling there to myself when you said a whole host of under 10 caps. Was that when they were 9 years of age and they played for France under 10s? Because there is a slight hint to that in many ways. I think that the fixture list really sets up for a huge opportunity for Ireland, playing France away, considering what you just said, then Italy at home, Wales at home, Scotland at home, and England away. I think when you look at all the other teams, I think it's about the best way you could possibly meet France. Speaking of the new French coach, I remember I was over in the press box in Ireland, in Rome, for the Ireland-Italy game when he was the head coach a few seasons back. And I was just watching him, and for 15-20 minutes he actually was completely disengaged with what was running in front of him. He wasn't talking to anybody. He was just like any other supporter sitting in the stand. I'd like to know how much energy he has, how much forward thinking he has after a long career at a very high level, and lots of success therein too. So I don't know how this marriage between him being parachuted in, all these new players, is going to work. Clearly we see it in the Premiership. Sometimes a manager coming in can shake things up. I think it remains to be seen. I think there's lots and lots of opportunity for Joe Schmidt and his team to go to France with a good degree of confidence.
Keith, you share that confidence?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm interested in what Jack Brunel does by bringing in a huge chunk of young guys in. Are they going to try and play a different style to the way they play in all the club games now in France, or are they going to try and play a little bit without that preconditioned idea that it's grind it up, win at home, even if you're only winning by a couple of points, and try and eke a win away from home? You know, that's kind of strange idea that club rugby has seemed to have taken over an awful lot in the style in which France plays. I mean, I don't know. Guy Nova has tried to change it to some degree, but may have been too late for Guy Nova's. So you're kind of looking at it and saying, yeah, we don't really know them. We'll, of course, Joe Schmidt's going to have these guys analysed, but they're not going to be analysed in a French jersey.
Yeah.
And so you're going to analyse them and say, he does this, he does this, he does this. And then he's going to say, actually, when you think about it, lads, we've more experience, we're in a better condition, we're on the top of the ground at the moment, we need to just go out and play our own game. Let's expose them where we can, let's make certain we keep our discipline right, and just go and win the bloody game. And I actually think that's a reasonable response to a squad that is chopped and changed and has lots of injuries within it. So it'll be easier for teams as they're coming down the line to have a better steer on what France will do, but they may grow into it coming down the line. So look, I think, yes, it's the game that we have, it's the game we want to go and just get a win over there. But winning in France is just so hard, and it shouldn't be as hard. And if the mentality of the Irish team is that they believe that they'll win, which I think they will, and that they then go out and perform accordingly, and keep our discipline right, because if we've watched anything, you can't have any foregone conclusions if somebody gets a yellow card at the wrong time and you lose 14 points or something. But look, I think it's a good one for us.
Yeah. And one last point on it, Liam, in modern day rugby, so say you've got either a 19 or a 20-year-old at number 10, and you've got a new coach, and you've got a squad which is just littered with players with very few caps. Can enthusiasm and a certain French, we're up for this game, and the home crowd and attacking kind of style, can all of those factors come together in modern day rugby to trump the organisational ability of a Joe Schmidt team? Is that still possible realistically in modern day rugby?
I'm not so sure, and the reason why I'm not so sure, Joe, is because the French clubs don't play that style. So that's a little bit of maybe what Keith was referring to.
Okay.
You can't come along and say, right, guys, I was watching you play for Montpellier, Clermont, La Rochelle, etc., and I just want you to play that way. It's at a higher level, but just play that way. I think team selection is of enormous importance for Ireland, and the ability to put those guys under enormous pressure. I think in part the flamboyance will come out, but with the relentless pressure that a Joe Schmidt team can impose upon that French side. And I agree 100% with, like, it's ridiculous to assume a victory in Paris because they don't come too often. But I think with the unrelenting pressure that Joe Schmidt's side can bring to the 25th phase consistently, I think these guys will ultimately struggle as a team to be able to compete in multiple phases and be able to and then when you think of some of the players they lost, I think it's Parra's out, is Bastro is out. So some of their key marquee players, your go-to guys, they won't be available either. So I think there's a really good opportunity for Ireland, and I think that the classic Joe Schmidt vice grip on the fixture is what's going to win the game for Ireland.
One last very cheap and cheerful point, if you don't mind, on Ireland is just how settled the team looks. Like, I make it realistically, there's 2 positions up for grabs. So either of you jump in here if I'm wrong in saying the back line is going to essentially be Carney, Stockdale, Bundyaki, Henshaw, Earls, Murray and Sexton.
Well, the wingers is interesting because Keith Earls is a left winger and Stockdale played for Ireland at the left wing. So how they chop them around is going to be interesting, and Andrew Conway as well. So it's a really, I think of what you said there, I think Rob Kearney is a definite starter. I think for me, Keith Earls should really be starting, which then means, well, who's going to play on the right wing, and that's Andrew Conway has been playing there for Munster. So it'll be really interesting.
So that's too tricky a swap for Stockdale.
Well, I think it's certainly a challenge. Now, I'm not at training sessions.
Sure.
Players of this quality certainly should be able to do it, but it's not a foregone conclusion that guys can just, and they do it, obviously, and a lot more maybe than back in the 15-20 years ago, and it does happen, but like, there's definitely room for thought. And then when you put into who's going to be on your bench, is it going to be Fergus McFadden, Ian Keighley, Kieran Marmion? Is Joe McCarberry, has he played any rugby? Is he, would Scannell be a really good addition coming in? So I think you've got to, sorry, what's that?
Would Larmour?
I don't think so for France, Keith. I think Italy at home is the ideal, because remember, Ireland playing France in Paris on Saturday, and with the travel time you lose a day, and with Italy coming up, I think that's the Italy game might be an opportunity to make 1 or 2 changes to that team that plays in Paris.
Yeah, I often think Schmidt tends to kind of do his own thing, and he may decide, you know what, this guy is good enough, let's stick him in somewhere. Let's see where that works out. I think the back line is, as you've described it, for the most part. I think Joe, for the first time, we mentioned it at the weekend, for the first time for a long time, we seem to have a fairly big strength and depth, and one of the elements we haven't talked about, which is post Lions, most players suffer and have kind of withdrawal symptoms from the Lions. That it is this kind of hyper intense period of time when you've already been hyper intense for 10 months of the year, and now you're having to do it again with guys you don't know, and it's very tough, and there's a bit of an add-on to it, but Ireland have managed their players incredibly well since the Lions, by stark comparison to England in particular, who just have not. And the England players are dropping like flies, but equally well, a lot of those English guys were fairly young, going out on a Lions tour. It exacts a toll.
Yeah, Eddie Jones mentioned that today. And then the forwards, so Furlong, Best, Toner, Henderson, Stander and O'Mahony all look fairly nailed on, you'd have to say. So you've got one back row slot, and it's McGrath versus Healy.
I think it's Healy at the moment.
Yeah, give me your back row again, Joe.
Well, Stander and O'Mahony, and we've a blank spot with Sean O'Brien out. I
wouldn't be so quick to rule out Jake Conan. I think that back row is going to change over the course of the Six Nations, regardless of injuries or not. I think it's definitely going.
I'd see Van der Fleer on the back row with maybe Levy sitting on the bench.
Funny, Brian O'Driscoll was in on Monday, and he did remind us all, at least against New Zealand in November, that Joe Schmidt really likes Jordy Murphy as well, and he seems to get the nod on big occasions.
Yeah, I think that he's a super footballing back row, and part of that allows him to play 6, 7 and 8, because he's an intelligent player as well as having the physical attributes. I think he has benefited enormously from Rhys Ruddock being injured, because the obvious move to Ulster is because there's a bottleneck of opportunity for him there. I think Josh van der Fleer will start at 7. Peter Mahoney's nailed down. I'm not 100% sure it's an automatic then that Conan and CJ Stander. I think that there's going to be some form of rotation there depending on the opposition as well. It's going to be really, really interesting.
Okay. Well, there's plenty of time to talk about all that in the time we have left. So we have Leinster and Munster through. You guys obviously watched Munster, as we mentioned, at Thomond Park, and Leinster, for their 6 wins out of 6, get Saracens, who seem to have turned a corner. So Keith, talk to us about these two games. Are we going to have 2 Irish provinces in the semi-finals?
I think we have a chance. I think Leinster will. I just think they're a pleasure to watch. How they played at the weekend was fantastic. Away in France, they literally just strangled a game. They didn't try and force anything. They just were incredibly focused. I thought with a lot of players, a bit of a change in the players, and with Johnny Sexton rested in total. Other players coming back from injury, I just thought their control and their focus was fantastic. It was like a study in how to win away from home. There was very, very few risks taken, pretty good discipline. It was excellent. Munster had 15 minutes where it was kind of nip and tuck, and then when they got the score, Castres went west, and some of that was just, it was actually great. I think more people turned up for the delayed one than were there ready for the kickoff. I think there were more tickets available, and it was due to be lashing raining at the start, and I actually think more people came in because there was a great atmosphere.
Yeah.
Really good. It was just really good crack, and we go back to it again. Just Simon Zebo was excellent in the air. He was absolutely tuned into the game. But Keith Earls was just fantastic. And at the very start of the game, I think the outside centre for Castres made a gap, went outside one of the props, and he got absolutely cut in half by Keith Earls. And they were both running in the same direction, but it was as if one was running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and the other guy was only trotting, because Earls just cut him in half. But to see the battered face in him, to see the lovely run back he did for Zebo's try, and the weight of that pass. He knew Zebo was there, and Zebo was having to get up to full speed to keep up with him, and he drew the pass perfectly, but he pulled it back, but left air in the ball. It was just left there, so you could run onto it without having to break stride. And so that, look, it was really good. And I do think, and it was funny because we talked about it before the game, but I do think under Van Graan there is more of a willingness to do something more. The back three looked like they're working as a unit as opposed to just running it back. So they're running it back as a trio, and that is a potent attacking weapon if you get a loose kick towards you, which it proved. So look, I think it's them playing Toulon. Toulon have the ability to do what Leinster did last week, which is to go away from home and try and strangle a team out. They've done that in the past. They will have more players back after the Six Nations, so it'll be a tough game. That's a harder game, but I do think Munster can get through it.
Okay, yeah, the word certainly is that Van Graan has given Felix Jones his head more than ever. Liam, final word for you then, or to you, on the 2 semi-finals. We're a little bit tight for time, but Munster Toulon at Thomond and Leinster Saracens.
Yeah, I think 2 Irish wins. However, you gotta say, from a Munster point of view, their front five, Klein in the number 4 jersey, I think is just enormously important. They should protect him at all odds. I thought, Stephen Archer, we discussed the scrummaging at length on Sunday. It was great crack. And
yeah, the listeners were saying, any more thoughts on scrummaging, lads?
No. Like it
was nearly as bad as your chat last night over the Nations Cup with Kevin Kilbane.
It's actually called the Nations League, Keith.
Nations League. I'll tell you what, comedy gold that was last night.
Competence. Sorry, Liam.
I think that makes perfect sense what you were talking about there. But I will say that from an injury point of view, the Munster second row, if they lose Klein, I think that could dent their ambitions usually, or indeed some of the key mark players like Conor Murray. But it was a really I was especially happy for Cronin, who came on, James Cronin, who got a good run of a game and got him back into the Six Nations. He hasn't played for Ireland since the 2016 Six Nations, so it was just a wonderful display by so many players. Obviously, we know what Leinster are doing. They're going for the 9-dart finish, which is a very, very impressive thing. But yeah, I'd be reasonably comfortable that, assuming injuries-wise, that both Irish provinces and adding Connacht into that as well should go on to the next stage.
Okay, beautifully done. Liam Toland, Keith Wood, thanks lads.
Brilliant show.
Hey, hope you enjoyed that latest offering from Off the Ball. If you want to subscribe, and you should, check out just up here. All our latest stuff is just down here. Generally, knock yourself out.